The Reluctant Dragon. This is an adaptation of a story by Kenneth Grahame, written over 120 years ago. Once, a boy lived with his mother and father in a cottage halfway up a hill. He was a lonely little boy, although not unhappy. His father was a shepherd, and his mother made stews and knitted socks and did other things that mothers in cottages did in those days. The boy spent his days reading. He especially loved books about nature or fairy tales, but he didn't mind what he read, as long as they were good stories. One evening, the boy was lost in a story about giants when the cottage door burst open. His father staggered in, trembling all over, and as white as the sheep he should have been watching. "A monster!" he bellowed. "I have seen a huge monster!" Before the boy or his mother could ask what he meant, the shepherd slumped onto a chair and began to talk in a breathless babble. "I was leading the sheep over the hill when one of them ran to one of the calves near the hilltop. As it got close, it made the most frightful noise and then scampered back to the flock. I feared there might be a wolf hiding there, so I crept closer." "What did you see, dear?" asked the mother. The father gripped the arm of the chair so hard that it creaked. "I saw the most terrifying creature. It was as big as 4 cart horses and covered in bright blue scales that shimmered in the moonlight. It had claws, too, great big claws, like great big claws." The boy glanced up from his book. "Don't worry, Father," he said. "It's only a dragon." "Only a dragon?" his mother exclaimed. "And just what do you know about it?" demanded his father. "Quite a lot, actually," the boy replied, closing his book. "You know about sheep and weather and things, and I know about dragons. I've always thought a dragon lived in that cave. In fact, I have been more surprised if you said there wasn't one hiding somewhere in there." "He's quite right," his mother agreed. "Dragons are his subject, and not ours. Do you think that poor animal is up there alone, without any supper?" "I'll pop by tomorrow and find out," suggested the boy. So that settled that, and they all had their stew. The next evening, the boy strolled up the chalk track to the top of the hill, and sure enough, he found the dragon stretched lazily in front of its cave. The creature looked quite relaxed, lying on its back and gazing up at the starry sky. "Hello, dragon," the boy called. The dragon rolled over and considered the boy with tired, sleepy eyes. "You've not come up here to bother me, have you?" "Not at all. I came to ask how you were, and that sort of thing, but if you're too busy, I'll just leave you here alone." No, don't go off in a huff," replied the dragon. "In truth, it is a little lonely up here." The boy plonked himself down on the ground beside the dragon. He plucked a blade of grass and chewed the end. "Will you be staying long?" he asked. "Can't really say at present," the dragon replied. "Seems a nice place enough." The boy had to agree. The view from the hilltop really was splendid, with grassy hills and woodland to one side, and to the other, the speckle of houses in the village, each with a perfect line of smoke rising from its chimney. "I hope to meet the locals if they're all as friendly as you," the dragon added with a huge yawn. "Then I can decide whether to stay or not." "Ah," the boy replied, sitting up. "Actually, that might be a problem." "Problem?" "Well, you're a dragon, aren't you? The enemy of the human race." "Nonsense," the dragon replied. "I haven't got an enemy in the world. I'm too lazy to make them." Even so, the dragon agreed not to go down to the village and worry the villagers as long as the boy returned often to visit. This delighted the boy, who rushed back every day for weeks. His parents didn't mind as long as he was home by 9 o'clock, and he promised that the dragon wouldn't eat him or anything like that. The dragon told stories about the olden days, when there were far more dragons and the world was a much livelier place. The boy loved every minute of it. Like the dragon, he was no longer so lonely, and the dragon's stories were even better than the ones he read in his books. But it wasn't long before news began to trickle down to the village that there was a dragon on the hill. Locals in the tavern had run out of things to talk about a long time ago, so this news was wonderful for conversation. They agreed that dragons were a nuisance and must be destroyed, but they were secretly quite proud. It was a distinction to have a dragon of your own, and a feather in the cap of the village. Still, this sort of thing could not be allowed to go on. The dreadful beast must be exterminated. The following day, the boy heard church bells ringing in the village and rushed to see what was happening. What a scene he discovered! Banners had been hung, and flowers were scattered across the road. Every villager was in the street chattering excitedly and jostling to get a better view of something approaching from the other direction. "What's going on?" the boy asked. "Why, we've been saved," a villager replied. "Saved from what?" "The dragon, of course." This didn't sound good at all. Frantically, the boy pushed his way past everyone until he was at the front of the crowd and could see who was causing all the excitement. None other than St. George himself strode up the street. The knight's plumed helmet was tucked under his arm, and his long hair swayed in a breeze as he posed for cheering villagers, assuring them that he would take care of their pesky dragon problem. The boy ran up the hill so fast that by the time he reached the cave, he struggled to speak. "Dragon," he panted. "He's here." The dragon sat outside his cave, polishing his scales with a rag so they gleamed bright turquoise in the sun. "Calm down, boy," he replied. "Who is here?" "St. George," the boy blurted. "The dragon slayer. You'll have to fight him." "Oh, dearie me," the dragon muttered. "You'll have to tell him to go away. I can't fight, and I won't. It's just so tedious. I have no interest in it at all." The boy was actually a little disappointed. He didn't want the dragon to get hurt, but he'd been excited by the prospect of a battle. "But, dragon, he'll cut your head off if you don't fight." "Oh, pish-posh," the dragon replied. "Just run down there and make him go away, will you?" The boy trudged back to the village, feeling glum. He wasn't going to see a fight, and now he had to sort out the whole mess. He made his way to the tavern where villagers were gleefully discussing the splendid battle in store. St. George sat alone, polishing his chainmail in preparation for combat. The boy approached warily. "May I have a word, Mr. St. George?" "Of course, young fellow. What is it you want? No doubt there's some terrible wrong you wish me to avenge. Well, consider it done." "Nothing of the sort," the boy replied. "Actually, it's about the dragon. There's been a misunderstanding. You see, he's a good dragon." "Ah, excellent," St. George replied, grinning broadly. "A good, nasty, evil dragon. I can't wait to chop off its—" "No," the boy interrupted. "He's not evil or nasty. He's my friend. He is very lazy, but he also tells funny stories, and he's kind and has never fought anyone in his life." St. George looked confused. "But this very evening at least a dozen villagers have told me in detail of this beast's hideousness." "They've never even seen the dragon," the boy explained. "They're making it all up because they want to see a fight." "You're quite sure about this?" "Quite sure, Mr. St. George." "You're certain there are no princesses trapped in his cave?" "Not one." "Well, this is a pickle. What shall we do?" So the boy did the best thing he could think of. He led St. George up the hill to meet the dragon. The knight followed, muttering about how irregular this was, but he was open to the prospect that he had misjudged the dragon after all. As they neared the cave, St. George turned and gazed at the lush green hills rolling in every direction. "Ah, what a place this would be for a battle," he said with a sigh. Just picture it." The dragon was dozing again outside his cave, but as they approached, he opened one eye and whispered to the boy, "Boy, who is this fellow?" "This is St. George," the boy explained. "We've come to talk things over." So the knight and the dragon exchanged hellos and chatted for a while about their predicament. St. George and the boy urged the dragon to consider a battle, but the dragon was having none of it. Every time the word fight was spoken, He waved a scaly paw and muttered, No, it's just not on. St. George sat back in despair. Well, the villagers are going to be terribly disappointed. They had planned a banquet to celebrate my victory. At this, the dragon sat up sharply, his sleepy eyes suddenly wide awake. The boy had never seen the creature look so alert. Banquet? He asked. You never said anything about a banquet. Would that make a difference? The boy asked. Of course it would, the dragon replied. Apart from your visits, I'm awfully lonely up here on this hill. I think it would be tremendous to enter society and make new friends. I've got it, the boy exclaimed. We'll have a fake fight. Dragon, you can stomp about breathing fire and roaring, and St. George, you can charge in on your horse, shouting heroic things. Terrific idea, St. George declared. Dragon, I'll prod you with my lance, and you'll make a big show of it, stagger around, and then flap over. I'll declare that you've not only been defeated, but also seen the error of your ways, and now you're a rather nice creature, as far as dragons go. So it was agreed, and the boy spread the word around the village that the battle would take place the very next day. From early the next morning, villagers streamed up the hill, carrying picnics and dressed in their finest clothes. Everyone was eager to grab the best spot to watch the battle, from which they could see all the action, but also flee if necessary. The boy sat right by the entrance to the cave, and everyone thought him awfully brave for doing so. Really, though, he was jittery with nerves. He couldn't see the dragon at all, and began to worry that the creature had changed his mind about the fight, and ran away. His worries mounted as a cheer rose from the crowd, and St. George appeared looking more gallant than ever. He wore a chainmail suit for the battle, which he must have spent half the night polishing so fiercely because it gleamed in the morning sun. A red feathered plume jutted from his helmet, and he held a long lance proudly up to the sky. The crowd edged back a little to give the knight some space to fight. But who would he fight? Wherever was the dragon? The boy shuffled closer to the cave mouth, staring into the darkness. The boy needn't have worried. After he left the previous day, the dragon had grown rather excited by the idea of a fake fight. He'd spent the whole evening working on snorts and growls, and was now bubbling with excitement for his big performance. Finally, he charged from the cave. He looked magnificent, with his sea-blue scales glittering and long tail swishing and smoke and fire spurting from his angry nostrils. His roar came out perfectly, bellowing across the hilltop and causing most of the crowd to stagger back in fright. Well done, dragon, the boy yelled, clapping his hands with delight. I didn't think he had it in him. St. George was equally impressed with the dragon's performance and a little worried he might be shown up. He puffed his chest, lowered his lance, and dug his heels into his horse's side. Someone yelled, Charge! But the knight and the dragon were already thundering towards one another over the grass. Both St. George and the dragon gave a little wink as they passed each other. Someone cried, Missed! They charged again and missed each other again, and the crowd howled with joy at what a wonderful battle this was turning out to be. By now the dragon had got carried away and was overdoing it a little, running around in circles so his scales rippled like the surface of the sea. The spectators absolutely loved it, of course, and their cheers grew louder as the battle entered its final act. St. George began to worry that the spectators were now cheering for the dragon, which was not right at all. The fight must end. He gathered up his reins again and began his final charge. The dragon charged too, this time in huge, ungainly bounds, cracking his tail like a cart whip and whooping and hooting the whole way. As they came close, the knight poked the dragon with his lance. It was a gentle prod, but it unbalanced the knight and sent him tumbling from his horse. At the same time, the dragon collapsed to the turf with a frightening wail, as if he had been dealt a fatal blow. It all looked so genuine that the boy ran in breathlessly, praying neither of them was really hurt. But as he approached, the dragon lifted one large eyelid and winked at him, before rolling onto his back and groaning. St. George stood in his most heroic pose, one hand on his hip and one foot resting on the dragon's big round belly. "Aren't you going to cut off his head?" yelled a spectator. "Not today," replied St. George. "I think we should have a banquet. The dragon shall come with us. I will give him a good talking to, and we can—" The crowd didn't listen to the rest. At the magic word banquet, they all leaped up and marched off down the hill, eager to celebrate the battle, for a feast is surely the only reason for having a battle. Banquets are pleasant things because they usually happen after something big is over, and there's nothing more to worry about. And this one was a splendid banquet. The dragon said the right things to everybody, and the villagers all agreed that he was a reformed creature who was very welcome to stay in their village. Everyone was happy. St. George was happy because there had been a fight, and he had won. The dragon was happy because he had new friends. The boy was happy because no one had got hurt, and the villagers were happiest of all because they had a splendid new dragon to boast about to their friends. At last, the banquet was over, and the villagers stumbled away with good nights and congratulations. By then, the dragon had flopped on the table, grinning and mumbling, "Jolly old night it's been. Yes, jolly little place this is." After all the excitement, the dragon was far too sleepy to make it back up the hill on his own, and demanded help from the boy and St. George. So they set off up the hill, hand and paw, the knight, the dragon, and the boy. The lights in the village began to go out, and stars shivered in the sky. As they disappeared from view, snatches of an old song drifted back to the village on the breeze. None of the villagers could be certain, but they all thought it was the dragon who was singing. The end.